listening and watching Rashkin Report. I'm your host, Yuri Rashkin, and I'm excited to welcome to this podcast, voiced directly from Moscow, Russia, Peter Evgenev. Peter is an interpreter and man of, I think, interesting views that we're going to learn more about. Peter, welcome to the program.
Hi. I'm cynical. I'm cynical of mythology and religion because as an interpreter, I'm a part of a professional chat, right? And I advertise myself as the chief bullshitologist, right? Because any bullshit, magic,
you can do it in 2 languages.
I've translated it all. Like any scam artist, any spiritual guru, energy coach. I believe in none of that cheese stuff. I'm sorry. There is a mystical side of me, but as far as people trying to sell you this crap, no. No one's going to make you a magician. No old man with a staff is going to come down from the mountains and save you. That's not going to happen. But there are a lot of people who are hungry for that.
So is it the rescuing of the drowning is the business of those drowning? So we should be taking care of ourselves? There is no, what are you saying here, Peter?
Am I saying there is no God, or there is nothing? No.
Because I think we got to this point rather quickly.
Yeah, what? I'll tell you something. I am very much a believer, but I wrote a thing about the Orthodox Church today, right?
Oh, did you? Okay, go ahead.
I don't remember. It was from some point in early Christianity. I believe it because it's absurd, and I understand that. As far as the whole thing with, I'm not only talking about the idea of God the Creator. I'm talking about the ways things are presented in the Bible,
okay.
The floods and all of the parting of the sea and all of that stuff. I believe it because it's absurd. You know what I'm saying? I would, with some suffering, I can kind of swallow it.
Yeah, but it seems like it seems like some kind of a medieval thinker that would say that because it is so crazy, that's why I want to believe it, because you can't understand it. You have to accept it.
Yeah, but you know what? I can take that. I'm willing, with some suffering, with some busted brain, I can say, okay, it's absurd, but you believe it. But you know what? But when it's not only absurd, when it's greedy, when it's lying, when it's
that's a big difference between
absurdity. I can take. Okay, you can believe in something absurd, but when you look at the church right now, we're having discussions about domestic violence law, right? Because women are being killed, and the Orthodox Church is speaking against it. It's like being a part of it is being an accomplice. At this point.
But just for a second to continue with your argument, if it is absurd, is right there, violence against women, example of something that's pretty absurd. Don't you accept that and believe into that because it is absurd? Or is the stories where you stop?
I think what they're trying to do, when they look at all of the things wrong with Christianity, because my dad still remains an Orthodox Christian, because he's part of the Jewish nice version of the Orthodox Church. Well, it is in place. But oh man, we had a lovely trip to Cyprus. I'm sorry for the detour, but I think you'll love it. So we took one of those excursions, like a tour of the island, and it was lovely. When you go past all of these lovely landmarks, and they would say, under these two statues, the lover have to kiss, and this is where you have to throw. This is where you have to throw a coin, for good luck. All of that shit. Me and my dad were both like, oh, it's a cringe moment, just continuously, one after the other. We're just sitting in this bus like, oh, again, another one, And then I start going, well, the Cyprus cedars didn't used to grow on Cyprus until the day Saint Helena really liked this place, and she turned the pines into cedars. And I look at my father. I don't even say anything. I was like, how do you like that? Well, so they start talking about, and then we go to this. There's this icon And there's this icon, it has its face covered because it's so holy, you just can't look at it. And there was this one patriarch 1,000 years ago, and he actually unveiled it, and he went blind. And since then, it was shut off. But you can buy small icons right now, and you can place them against the big one, the big one to take on the magic power.
Right.
And, I'm just sitting there with my dad. Once again, it's a silent scene. It's like, yeah, what do you think of that, Dad? It's like,
right.
I love.
No, this is the mix of religion and belief and tourism and local needs, because I think what they did to you with the fountain, it sounds like it's a form of taxation. You have to throw a coin in this fountain, now throw a coin in this fountain.
Exactly. No, I mean it's great because it's like it's seeing the Greek myth, the Aphrodite, mixed with Christian myth, like 1-to-1, like the same thing. Like this is where you throw a coin, and this is the holy icon. Lovely. And then. We're sitting on the front in front of the bus, right behind the tour guide. And at the end of the scene, she was like. I got we stopped by a monastery. I didn't even get out of the bus. Actually, I was sitting on the bench. I didn't care to walk in because I was like, too much,
You don't say.
Not that I was afraid that I'd be struck by lightning.
For your blasphemy.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So, we're sitting in the front seat. She's right in front of us, and she handed us this bag full of cotton swabs with myrrh, and she goes like, "Oh yeah, you can use for your wounds, give some to your friends. You just throw it away when it starts smelling bad." So I'm sitting here with my dad. I was like, you want to just message.
No, thank you. That's not my kind of souvenir. All right.
Yeah.
But okay, so to you, this is all part of religion?
To me, it's all sad. To me, it's all really sad because I think, the biggest problem with Russia, it's a new word that appeared in my vocabulary recently, is non-love, right?
Non-love.
Нелюбовь. That's a Russian word.
Okay.
It's very interesting, people enjoy, like for instance, you start talking about like diet or working out, doing sports, and they start talking like, oh, but you have to eat less, you have to suffer, and that's, people always love to talk about what's wrong with them. They find pride in showing off their shortcomings. Oh, I'm so terrible with languages. I'm so clumsy, and they think of no bigger favor that can do for you than tell you about what's wrong with you. It's a part of a sort of a suffering Russian Orthodox Christian mentality. You have to suffer. You have to be miserable. I think it's actually the biggest problem the country is facing. It's a psychological one. It's nothing works. Nothing will ever work out. It's hopeless. And it doesn't matter whether you're a liberal or a conservative. It's all about this, lamentation. They have to bury the shit.
Okay, that sounds very pessimistic. So does it mean that pessimism is a general, like a national trend?
I believe it is, let's put it this way, I believe it is something that we have to overcome. This culture of suffering, the adoration of suffering. I'm a liberal, and oftentimes, on Facebook, people tell me it's like, well, you live in your liberal bubble, you don't know what Russians really think, like you're like too remote, you don't know the people, you don't know what they're like. But I think I told you, I know what they're like because a couple of years ago I did a documentary project which is called Americans Talk About Russia, Russians and Russians Talk About Americans, about America, pardon me, And I've done 60 hours of interviews. I know what Russians think, and the idea of suffering and self-sacrifice as a positive value is a big thing with them. And that is just sad and needs to change.
Well, the Russian people are rich in suffering, if frequently not much else.
Well, if there is anything we're famous for, is living in the States, it's Russian lit. Fucking read it.
Right. I mean, I think it may have been a joke, but there was a Russian version of Alexa that was, discarded because it was based on programmed using language from Russian literature, and it was found to be too depressing of an AI. So, they had to go in a different direction. So the classic Russian language is a language of suffering and pain because it is good. So this is that, I think in Christianity, sometimes it's referred to as Calvinism, where if it's good, it's bad, and if it's bad, it's good. The worse, the better. That seems to, how's that working out?
Yeah, I know. And the other thing is like, it's basically monarchist, Russian Orthodoxy,
But I mean, that's how the country is, so why shouldn't the church be like it?
Well, actually, when it comes to Orthodox Church, it is just as willing to collaborate with KGB, Hitler, and the Tsar. They work everywhere.
Well, is it because they don't have an independent head like Vatican does, like Catholic Church?
I think they have this idea of well, first of all, I
mean, technically there is a head of Russian Orthodox Church, of course, but he has no independence whatsoever. Not to mention he's basically appointed by the head of state.
Well, my personal take is that the Russian Orthodox Church serves the state. Right. It's not about serving Jesus at all.
And I hate to say this to you, but I think that people from the outside of Russia that know anything about Russia and Russian Church would readily agree with you. I don't think that you're not even. I hate to say it, but like this is not
news for anybody.
Yeah, sorry for Russian Orthodox Church, or for
this. The blessed light that comes down on Easter every year in Jerusalem. You see, it's one of those miracles that is meant to be, the proof of it, of the whole thing being true. You see, it used to this fire, and like if the fire doesn't come down, it's the end of the world. And the time used to vary. It used to come down at different times, but I don't remember exactly the hour. But when the Channel 1 in Russia bought the broadcast time, the fire started coming down at 14:15 exactly.
There's schedule, it's live on the air. Those things are important.
I have no further questions. It's like
the blessings have been, according to schedule, issued as necessary.
Miracles, yes.
But I will briefly remind our listeners and viewers that you're watching and listening to Rashkin Report. My name is Yuri Rashkin. If you like this kind of crazy conversation, make sure to sign up for Rashkin Report on YouTube, like it on Facebook, and get in touch. Let's chat. My guest today is Peter Evgenev, who is an interpreter, translator, both in Moscow, and he is joining us from a classic Moscow kitchen, which is fantastic for authenticity. This is not blue screen. This is, green screen. This is real kitchen, exactly.
As Soviet as it gets.
As Soviet as it gets. Yes. I mean, just for authenticity, I wish everybody else to leave that behind otherwise. Peter, since this interesting conversation, I knew it was going to be something, so religion. So we're speaking about religion, I guess, and the difference between belief and bureaucracy. But as we look at Russian situation, and and there's no real point in like dwelling too much on particulars of politics, but there isn't much of any opposition to Mr. Putin. So in that setting, it kind of makes sense that more people should be interested in religion, as perhaps God is the only way to change anything. How do you get that? So does religion play a useful part there because it allows people to, imagine the possibility of a better outcome?
Well, if someone is really to attempt to escape the state, they would probably go to some other religion other than the Russian Orthodox Church. And in fact, yes, I mean there is Buddhism, there are all sorts of things, and in fact, a lot of the people that I would refer to as being from Vedic world, in other words, both Buddhists and Hinduists, when they have a hard time speaking about Russian Orthodox orthodoxy between without foaming up with the lips. I don't know what you can say. That's the right way to put it in English. They get
all right. Wait a minute. This is a good one. So what you're saying is that a truly religious person wouldn't be a member of Russian Orthodox Church because that's.
I wouldn't say truly religion. I would say the person trying to escape the state and the person who's not really happy about Putin. That's not about
being. All right. Got it. That's good.
I'll tell you something. What you're saying actually was very much true for Orthodox Church in the 60s and the 70s. Because my parents belonged to the Russian intelligentsia that was actually baptized. Because back in the times, the church was persecuted, and I personally have the memories of like my first grade teacher being like, "Don't go there, it's terrible," and I remember having to be silent about it. So it was very much an underground thing. My parents got baptized illegally. My father got beaten in KGB for having the Bible in the house for a second. That's some gloomy stuff. So basically, a lot of the people who didn't have much faith in the system, let's put it this way, they thought of some activity where they wouldn't have to kiss ass too much. I'm sorry, I'm naming things for what they are. And some people try to make the escape of doing science. Like, you don't have to glorify Stalin or whoever, or Brezhnev or the Communist Party if you deal with physics or chemistry. So a lot of the position went into science as opposed to being a writer, journalist, or.
But even in literature, you had the division where a lot of very talented people went into children's literature because there was less propaganda and less politics there.
Exactly. In other words, you had to do your history of Communist Party in school, and people didn't. A lot of people didn't want to waste their time on all of that stuff, I guess. So what happened is people escaped into church, and Andrew Lloyd Webber piece, remember that Jesus Christ Superstar? Oh, a lot of our clergy actually were turned Christian by that. It's lovely,
that's really hilarious because it resonates with me, because when I was, I think, 15 and 16, when I discovered Jesus Christ Superstar, I thought, this is, I think, to me, the best thing Christian church has done. So, if I were to become Christian, that would be that beat right there,
Yeah.
So I can relate, but go ahead.
In other words, what it used to be that the church used to be the refuge for the decent people, for the people that didn't want to lie. But meanwhile, in the West, the refuge for the decent people was atheism. Right? That's how it was. And now we're just getting back. Now we're just catching up. Right? If you're honest, right, and you're capable of critical thinking, you'll be an atheist. Because basically, I sort of departed from Christianity, observing how the church acts. I mean, we have to separate the figure of Christ and the Orthodox or any other church. So it makes no sense. You can only belong to one. Either Christ or the Russian Orthodox Church. You cannot be loyal to both. It's impossible if you have half a brain. There is this where I'm coming from. There's this guy Vladimir Smirnov. A priest, a rather controversial character. He likes making jokes. Sometimes his jokes are strange. You see, when a lot of the people in the church, when they talk about the problem of Orthodox people, say, well, only 2% of Russians are true practitioners. In other words, go to church every Sunday. Everybody else is just baptized. They're not real Christians. So the latest quote from Smirnov that I'm sure you love is that. Well, there are the 2% of those who are vytsirkovliny, the true practitioners, and everybody else we should just hang,
Well, see right there's one thought to think about, and you're watching Rashkin Report. I'm your host, Yuri Rashkin, and my guest straight from Moscow Kitchen is interpreter extraordinaire Peter Evgenev.
Thank you for the kind words.
You know what? I think I do have kind of a bottom line to this, and that's what you were speaking about with your dealings with Channel One, which is that you have to rely on your personal ethics, which I guess becomes morals. But that's where I think everybody probably is that having that personal code that they individually are following. And for them, this is the right thing to do, whatever that is. And for them, that something else is wrong thing to do. And that's all there is.
True that. Yeah, because basically, that's now that we talk about law. For us, our internal laws and rules mean shitloads more than the criminal code. Of course, yes. Well, basically, Russia is very much criminalized too, as I'm sure you know. Everybody, all Russians understand and speak prison slang if needed. Even President Putin, whatever, whack them in the john. It's pretty tragic, I think. And the other thing is. That's something that that may be worth knowing for the English speakers is that there is when people serve time in prison, there are mujiks, men, and there are thieves, right? People who live by stealing, and Russia is a country of a triumphant thief. If you're a man, if you're making an honest living, you're a sucker. That's a big thing. When we talk about corruption and everything else, being honest is, fortunately, I'm very hopeful. I'm very hopeful of the young generation, like Zhukov and others. They see right through that stuff, and that's the only thing that gives me hope. Because I'm talking about Russians being negative, and whilst I offer no solution. No, I'm very hopeful of the youth, because they no longer have the fear in their eyes. Because it used to be when I was younger, and I'm sure you're familiar with this too. You go out of the country and you recognize the Soviets by the eyes. They have been through the abuse, through the shit. Because in the Soviet Union, as you know, every store clerk was a tyrant. The little power they had, they used it to the utmost, and would be sadistic with others. It was a part of the culture. Now, with the advent of ill capitalism in Russia, that actually got better. People at the store actually smile, and some of them actually
right. It shocked me. I was not expecting it. It was very nice.
Yeah, it was a welcome change, and obnoxious salesman is a rarity.
Actually, I think it was pretty much replaced with an obnoxious customer, because it seems like the customers have become much more brazen, and the waiters and the customer service are like, sure, like it changed. The power ratio changed.
It's funny. A couple of weeks ago, I saw a classmate of mine at the register giving the lady shit, I know, like he didn't bring it up right, and he was being really mean and obnoxious, well, I made it so that he didn't recognize me, I didn't really offer myself up, it's like I didn't go and say hi, and as he walked out, and I know the sales lady for like 5 years, and as he walks out after being a complete bitch with her for 5 minutes, I come up to her and say, "Don't worry, I went to school with him. He was always an asshole." Don't take it personally.
Yeah, and that's so true, because so often people that are not nice to us, turns out they're really not nice to anybody.
Yeah. But she smiled. It kind of made her day better.
Well, Peter, thank you so much for this conversation, and let's see if you're still listening to this, you've listened to the whole conversation. Well, I applaud you. That's fantastic. Leave us a comment, and thank you, Peter. You're watching Rashkin Report. This was Yuri Rashkin, and my guest today was Peter Evgenev, straight from Moscow Kitchen. Take care.
Good night.